If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, well, aging.
So in today's episode, I kind of wanted to reflect back on a lot of our older episodes. A lot of our older episodes, we went ahead and we talked about the importance of lifting, and we talked about how to lift and what exercises that we should be doing in order to age well. But we really haven't dove into why do we lift, right? And, you actually ended up sending me that article from T Nation, and they kind of covered the basis of the importance on why do we lift? What benefits would we get, and how can we motivate ourselves through that? And I thought, what a great article that we can kind of dive into and tie in today's episode on why do we lift? Why do you lift?
I lift because I tell myself to.
Is that why?
Yeah, I listen to myself. I think, we've mentioned some of the reasons in the article that we're going to talk about. And we'll definitely put in the episode notes. We'll refer to that. It's the 5 overlooked reasons to lift weights. And so those are kind of the overlooked reasons. I think the obvious reasons are, the benefits that we get from being stronger. And I think I have stressed a few times in the podcast that, we tend to overlook lifting weights as we age and start favoring more cardiorespiratory endurance and more stretching, and you'll see people that'll go to the gym and they'll spend 20, 30 minutes stretching or foam rolling, and then they get on the treadmill, and then they maybe go over and do a few curls or something like that, and they don't really emphasize the weight training. But when we look at weight training from a cardiorespiratory endurance benefit, now, of course, you're not getting cardiorespiratory improvements because you're lifting weights, but because you lift weights, you can do more cardiorespiratory exercise, you get more physical activity. It's going to carry over into heart health. And I think that is an important reason to be lifting weights, so that we are more functional as we age. And from a body composition standpoint, lifting weights is going to boost our lean tissue. And whether we lose fat or not, we have a healthier body composition. And that translates into, as we've talked about numerous times, it's going to have benefits in terms of our immune system. When we have a better body composition, it's going to have improvements in our insulin resistance so that we are less likely to be diabetic. It's going to generally improve our ability to do the things that we want to be doing. And the more we do, the more healthier habits we begin to initiate. Flexibility. You don't have to stretch as much as you might think when you're lifting weights, if you lift weights properly, because you're doing it through a full range of motion. Your range of motion is going to be maintained. There's less reason to be stretching. And then we can get into all the other benefits from the motor skill related aspect of it as well. But yeah, this article is really great in terms of reasons that we maybe don't think about, or as they say, benefits we forget in regards to lifting weights. And why people lift weights is going to vary from individual to individual. I mean, some people want to be physique athletes, or they want to have that really nice physique. Other people just want to be healthier. If for no other reason, people should lift weights because I tell them to.
Well, I mean, I lift because me personally, and it kind of ties in with a lot of the stuff that they have, but I like getting stronger. To me, there's nothing better than increasing your weight in your lifts. Like it's almost like you're overcoming an obstacle. A lot of individuals that are out there, they think, oh, I don't want to get too big and I don't want to get too bulky. Don't focus on that. Focus on your strength. Okay, today I only did 100 pounds. Tomorrow I'm going to do 115, right? Now, that 15 pounds, that's a huge jump, but pushing your body and then actually achieving that goal, to me, there's no greater feeling. Plus, I like to be able to, I don't know, when I lift, it gives me a lot more energy. I feel way more, almost like a drive of competitiveness about me. And it carries on throughout the day. It carries on throughout the week. You almost feel invincible when you lift, personally. Yeah. So, all right, going back into the article, number one benefit of why you should lift is it fights anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and we've talked about, the elements of depression to a certain extent on the podcast, and depression is growing within our society. I mean, it's across the board, and especially as we age, because as we age, particularly because we have a more disconnected society, depression is a lot more prevalent, especially in the older adults. We saw a huge rise in depression during COVID, and especially for individuals that were living in nursing homes and couldn't see their families and were separated from their friends and everything else. And so anything that we can do to elevate mood, whether in the short term or the long term, or to minimize the effects of depression is a great thing. And weight training does that. And it does it by improving our hormonal balance. We get to varying degrees those kind of endorphin releases during the lifting. We're going to talk a little bit more about things like self-efficacy and things like that. But in the short term, the release of things like catecholamines, the epinephrine, norepinephrine, all those feel-good hormones. We've talked a bit about dopamine and its effects on dementia and things like that, help to overall improve our levels of enthusiasm, our levels of optimism, our energy levels, as you mentioned for yourself, our feelings of vitality, all those kind of things. And so if you're prone to anxiety, lifting helps to, again, combat some of those hormones, but it also gives us better confidence going out into the things that we might be doing.
Well, yeah, just diving into the article itself, it says regular resistance training does affect those hormones, and it optimizes us to be in that surviving and thriving mentality. It says, in a depressed state, the hardest part will be starting. Once the intensity triggers the biomechanical releases within the body, there's a higher probability of a greater exercise session. So maybe you're in the mood and you're like, I don't really want to work out. I'm feeling low. I'm feeling depressed. Push yourself, challenge yourself. You know what? The endorphin high that you're going to get after that gym, after lifting, after doing a bench press, doing squats, doing deadlifts, implementing that 5x5 program that we've stressed so much in our past podcasts, implementing that. And it's scientifically proven that you're going to get a little bit of an endorphin high. And if anything, give yourself a pat on the back. You overcame an obstacle and a mindset of, I don't want to do this, but you still did it and you're benefiting your future self. You just made a payment to the future version of you, which hopefully is aging well to be a better version of you.
Another thing to consider, too, is the effects on the fight or flight response. And I'm sure you've probably heard me talk about this in physiology of exercise class, if you were awake during that lecture. But, we talk about the hormones and how the hormonal response to certain triggers tends to decrease with regular exercise, particularly something like resistance training. And so when we talk about those catecholamines, though the response that comes in preparation for exercise tends to be smaller, So less hormone is required to be able to carry out the same response. And so when we have that fight or flight response, and that's that response we have walking down a dark alley and we hear footsteps behind us and we kind of prepare to either turn around and fight or to haul tail out of there, the hormones are pumped up. So our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our muscles tense up. We start seeing the release of fat and glucose into the system so that we can energize the muscles. And if that response is at a maximum, which it tends to be a bit more when we are out of shape, we don't have any capacity to elevate that response any further. I've always kind of used the example in class. If I were going to walk, the story that I tell when I was at a conference and somebody was coming, it was early in the morning and somebody was walking up behind me. I could hear the footsteps and I was walking to the conference in an unfamiliar area and I felt that kind of tensing up, that fight or flight response. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy about half my size come running by me with little bags of groceries. And I kind of laugh at myself still, thinking that, how did I have that response for, such a, non-existent threat? But if I had turned around and instead of this little guy running, with no ill intent, it was some massive monster. It was, Dwayne Johnson wielding a knife at me. After I defecate my pants, I'm not going to have any capacity to elevate my fight or flight response. And more than likely, I'd have collapsed of a heart attack. But because I was in better shape, I would have that capacity to be able to turn and elevate that response even further. And I think that's an important element of what we're talking about here with combating anxiety, depression, and so on, that our hormonal responses to the stimuli that cause us to be anxious or to be depressed, we have a capacity, if something more major occurs in our lives, we can elevate that response without it doing further harm to our body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that actually can tie into even today's crazy world. Say someone is working at an office and, there just so happens to be absolute worst case scenario. There's an active shooter scenario. There's been studies that people will see from their windows, from their office windows, either a SWAT team or an active shooter scenario outside, and their brain doesn't fully process it. Oh, it must be a movie. Oh, they must be filming something. Oh, what's going on? They're kind of slow, but then the adrenaline, the stress comes in, that realization of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in harm's way. And they freeze. But it seems that if you are constantly doing resistance training and you're not elevating those hormones to a max, but you're keeping them at a nice balanced level, you can react accordingly to get yourself and others around you in a safe place, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
And think about that too. With that, and that kind of leads into benefit two, which we'll talk about here in a moment, which is self-efficacy. But from that standpoint of being in that stressful situation, you have a little bit more confidence in being able to withstand certain trials or certain difficult situations when you have experience putting plates on the bar and lifting those plates off of the ground. When you think, I can deadlift 400 pounds, that gives you a level of confidence in what you're doing, and you're not going to be as anxious because you don't feel as helpless. Which I guess brings us to number two, which is it develops self-efficacy. Do you remember what self-efficacy is?
Of course I do. But for those listeners that don't know what it is, why don't you go ahead and explain it?
Oh, you're going to make me explain it.
Yes, sir.
Self-efficacy was, as you recall from exercise motivation and adherence when you took that with me, I always said that, if you didn't have an answer to one of my questions, just chime out self-efficacy and chances are you're going to have the right response, because that is one of the most important factors in our ability to continue exercising, to be motivated to exercise, to do any kind of behavioral change. Self-efficacy refers to our long-term confidence in our ability to do something. And so when we have a higher self-efficacy, we tend to be more willing to take risks, to do challenging things, to do things we haven't done before. And resistance training gives us that self-efficacy. If you're a stronger individual, you're not going to be as, I was going to say inconfident. Is that a word? You're not going to be as fearful of doing things that you might be called upon to do, because I've picked up that heavy bar. I've lifted those heavy weights. This is not going to be a big challenge. And, we also carry ourselves a little bit differently when we've been resistance training. When you feel stronger, you're going to have a stronger presence. And that feeds our mind as well. We just feel like we can do more.
Well, I think the article really sums it up perfectly. Is confidence feels good, but it's fleeting. Efficacy, however, is a form of a long-term confidence that has less of a peak, but also way less of a valley. So it's almost like you're in a continuous state of confidence of, yeah, I can do this. I can overcome this. Yeah, this is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's that mind over matter. And going back to what I said earlier about the importance of lifting, if you see something and you're like, man, I can't do it, you're right. You're absolutely right. You can't, because you've already thought that you can't. You have that mentality that you can't. But if you're like, I can do this, it's going to be a challenge, but I got it. And you do everything in your power to dig deep and push through, man, you truly, it's a mind over matter thing. And I think with lifting, overcoming those obstacles, and whether you're just instilling the confidence within yourself and you're growing efficacy, you're almost like putting you're giving a bank deposit to your future self, right? Here's some more confidence. Here's some more confidence. And then, a year later, after you get on this awesome routine, you're not only is your physical appearance going to change, but your mental mentality, right? Your mindset is going to change as well.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. Yeah.
Sorry.
I have old friend, former pastor when I lived in New York, that used to say his father taught him, never done nothing. He was an old Oklahoma farmer. And so this concept that, can't has never done anything would be a little better English for it. Can't, that word can't, when we say we can't do something, well, you can't because you've chosen not to do it. There's very few things in life that, if we improve our circumstances, we put the effort into it, that we can't do. Now, it might take a long time, but we can do it if we put the effort into it. And I think resistance training helps us with that, because it teaches, okay, well, I can't bench 300 pounds, but I can if I continue to train and I get stronger and I add a little bit of weight every week. And, it might take me 6 months. It might take me a year. It might take me 2 years. But if I keep training toward that, I can do that. And there might be a few things in it that really stretch, but I might never be able to deadlift 1,000 pounds, but I've never trained for it, right? I've never attempted that. I can say that at 59, I can deadlift almost 435 pounds, which I never did in my 20s. And so having that goal, reaching a goal, there's sub goals along the way, builds that long-term confidence that we can continue to pursue towards bigger and bigger things. And I think that's what they mean by the self-efficacy that we can get from lifting weights.
You want a neat, easy test on the power of your mind? Next time you get like a little sniffle, if you start thinking, "Oh no, I'm going to get sick. Oh man, I'm getting sick." Your body actually has a reaction, and you become more sicker with that. But if you're just like, "Oh, I feel like I'm kind of getting a cold," you know what? It's fine. It's just a little sniffle. I'm just going to power through it. Those individuals who continuously go to work, they thrive, and it's almost as if that sickness that they got, it kind of just falls off of them versus an individual that, "Oh, I can't come into work today. I'm sick." And then they're like sick for 3 or 4 days, overcoming it. It truly is. It's the power of the mind. It's Our mind is arguably one of the greatest weapons. And if we can connect our mind to our body, we as humans are a force to be reckoning with. Speaking of that, speaking of your confidence, speaking of that mind and mentality, that ties us into number 3, right? Which is, and I don't know if I can say this, but this is,
You can say it.
This is a direct quote from T Nation.
We'll just click that little box that says, it's got the adult language in it or whatever. But
number 3, the benefits of lifting and why you should lift. It makes you less of a whiny little bitch.
Oh, it's a little less of a whiny bitch, not a little whiny bitch, but you had to, you extrapolated on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit colorful, and that's part of what kind of T Nation does in some of their articles. But it's a good benefit, and there's a few ways to approach that. When you look at what they say in the article, talk about what happens when you take control of your health and fitness. You realize how much else in your life is within your control. So we kind of transfer from that more of a internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. We take charge of what we can do. We can take ownership of circumstances in our lives, and they mention your sleep cycle or schedule, kitchen food, what comes out of it. So you make the choices of eating healthier, which transfers into further health benefits and so on. You talked earlier about kind of working out when you don't want to, and you feel like, yeah, I was able to accomplish it. I was able to do that. And so it's a lot harder to be a quote unquote whiny bitch when you have demonstrated your ability to overcome, the minor things and sometimes even the bigger things. And so, when we wake up in the morning, our body's always going to be complaining. Our body will tell us, "I do not want to do this." What do you mean? It's 4:30 in the morning. You're going to take me down to the gym? No way. But when we take command over our body and say, "No, we're working out," and we always feel better afterwards, it's a lot harder to kind of continue complaining. And, they end that section of the article by saying, quote, "Bitching and moaning about things that happen in life won't solve anything. Your actions will. And resistance training teaches us that. We learn what we can control and realize just how insignificant other problems can be in the grand scheme." And so, there's more that we can build off of this, I think, as well with the aging population. A lot of us have the image in our mind of the grumpy old man complaining about everything, this ache and pain or rising taxes, or when I was a kid, you could think of countless different examples of maybe not the quote unquote whiny bitch, but the complaining old man. It could be kind of the same thing. We don't have to be like that as we age. And when we resistance train, we really have less to whine about. You're going to be, less joint pain. You're going to have less, you're going to have muscle aches and pains. But that's part of it. And you tend to, I know this is being an aging adult. When I have pain, I'm usually thinking about, okay, what am I doing wrong in my training, or what can I do better in my training to counteract this? I'm not thinking, oh, here we go again. I got my shoulders hurting. I didn't sleep very well last night. I'm just going to complain all day. No, it's like, shut up and do something about it, right?
Shut up and lift.
Yeah. And, I think it kind of goes back to the whole self-efficacy piece and the anxiety piece that, when we improve those, we are going to be less likely to be whining or being self-critical or complaining about our circumstances. We're going to think that we can do more about it.
Well, what's really cool about that particular article, it looks like they did interview a weightlifting coach. Michael DeSanti is his name. And he stated in that article that complaining is just arguing against the universe with no intention of changing anything. And let that sink in for a second.
Sounds like Facebook.
What?
Sounds like Facebook.
Well, if you're complaining, right, and you're just like, oh, well, I can't go to the gym today. It's raining outside, or I don't really want to. My bed's so comfortable. Then you've already accepted defeat and you don't want to better yourself. You don't want to age well. You don't want to have that investment in your future self. You don't want to send a message to your kids or your grandkids that like, hey, you can overcome any obstacle, right? You've accepted defeat at your work instead of saying, oh, well, I'm applying for a new position and they're choosing this person over me because they play favorites. Well, think back. What can you do to improve your skill set? That way, when the next door of opportunity comes in, like you're walking in and you're taking that opportunity. That's yours. Stop complaining. Make it happen.
I think one of my biggest complaints of my peers, as we're aging, is hearing people saying the phrase, it sucks to get old. It's like, no, it doesn't. I mean, think of all the opportunity. You got all the bad crap behind you, you're done with your education, done struggling financially, kids might be out of the house. You're not having to deal with that anymore. Not to make it not sound like it's bad to have kids at home, but it comes a point where you want to just kind of be free of many of the burdens of life. And aging is great. I mean, I've gotten to a point, and maybe it's just my particular mindset, but I feel like every birthday is a celebration of accomplishment and what's new. And I can kind of look back and hopefully be able to look back and say, I'm better now at this age than I was the year before. And I want to continue to be stronger, to be more fit as I age. And it might, it's not going to be dramatic increases, but when you're lifting weights and you're maintaining that muscle mass, you're maintaining your activity level, as you look around at the people around you that are not doing those things and that are not aging successfully, you look a lot better. You're looking a lot stronger. And so you feel more confident.
Well, and that also ties into with that aging population of it sucks to get old. It does suck to get old if you're not taking the time to invest in yourself.
Right.
Right. If it may suck to get old, but it doesn't suck to age. I wish I had the evidence with me. I just read an article and they said some of the strongest individuals or the top I guess bodybuilders or weightlifters, they're actually in their late 40s, mid 50s. Some of them are actually in their 60s that compete, and they invested in themselves. They're healthier. Their mindset is way different versus someone who's in their 20s, not knowing what they're doing. I don't know. I think that's a myth. I think that's a false statement. I think your body definitely, there is some effects on aging. You may not be as spry as you once were, but it's kind of a trade-off. There's a maturity that goes with it. Would you disagree on that?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm following exactly what you're saying in that, but when we talk about bodybuilders, bodybuilding, I think, is a really good example of some of the things that we're talking about. That, and I've brought up before, again, I was going to say it's really Neiman's J, that J-shaped curve when we look at the benefits of physical activity and exercise based on intensity, moderation level, and time invested in those types of things. And that moderate approach is always the much more beneficial for immunology, for reducing the risk of illness, reducing the risk of injury and those types of things. We have a lot of individuals that take this exercise to an extreme when they're young. And, I'll use as an example often, training athletes. We have a bit of a push or a kind of a segment in the fitness industry right now that's, train like an athlete. You have the older people doing training protocols and progressions like you would train a collegiate athlete or a professional athlete. And people don't realize that athletes beat the crap out of their bodies and do more harm in the long term for that short term gain. There's, unless an athlete really trains with an appropriate moderation and thoughts for their long term health, they can really beat themselves up. I mean, you look at bodybuilders, bodybuilding today is drugged up more than it ever has been. There's a lot more steroid use and supplementation use and all those types of things to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think, it's not a secret in the bodybuilding field anymore. It's not kept it closeted that they are using certain stacks of hormones and drugs and things like that in order to stimulate muscle growth. But I was reading something just the other day about Tom Platt. Most massive legs you've ever seen in bodybuilding.
Well, yeah, but also have you seen his workout routine? It's insane.
Yeah, an insane workout routine. But the article is basically talking about him, sharing that he only did a stack of two drugs and in really small doses in his bodybuilding. So admits to using steroids, but in very small doses. And he was able to have the growth that he had because of his genetics, because of the training programs that he did. And the steroids, as he talks about in the article, was just to that kind of fine tuning. He kind of used as an analogy the polish on a car. If you have, I forget what vehicle he used as an example, but let's just say, you have a Prius. Putting wax on the car is not going to make that Prius a Ferrari. But if you got a Ferrari and you put the polish on it, it really shines and it just stands out even further. And so that's how he kind of thought of using the steroids back in his age. And many more of the bodybuilders at that time, we tend to think back, they were, that was the age of steroids and all that. They were using them much more sensibly, and that has gone haywire now. And we're seeing more and more bodybuilders that are dying at early ages of heart conditions and things like that. Tom Platt still looks very good for his age. We just last night watched Samaritan with Sylvester Stallone. Now, Sylvester Stallone, I think, is rumored to have used at least growth hormone and probably some level of steroids in his training for Rocky and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not judging anybody for doing or not doing steroids in their training. I think, with a moderate approach, it can have some benefit. It's not quite as beneficial as we think. And there's certainly downsides health-wise to using them. And people should certainly be cautioned in just blindly approaching using these drugs for training benefit. But, but Stallone still looks in really great shape. Arnold is still in very, very great shape. These guys are in their 70s, 80s maybe, and still looking overall pretty good. You got these guys that retire from bodybuilding in their 30s or 40s, and they might be dead by the time they're 50 or 60, or they look like crap. And so how did I get to all this? But
I don't know, man.
But when we talk about lifting weights, we're not talking about going overboard with it. We're talking about doing enough to improve your physical abilities and to maintain that health and that longevity by resistance training. It's not destroy your body early on and aging poorly. And so again, I really emphasize that idea that moderation in the exercise and the intensities that we're doing are going to have the most long-lasting benefits to the individual. And going overboard is going to lead to having some issues as you age. And if you're an athlete and that's your choice, and I think we benefit tremendously from athletics in our youth. And as we move up, collegiate professional level, there's greater demands on us, particularly as we have monetized sports more and more. And so performance is going to be driven by dollars. And so we put a lot more stress on our bodies. But once we retire from that, we have to kind of have a plan in mind for continuing to do the things that are going to first get us healthy again and continue to maintain that health so that we can age more successfully.
I agree. I do think though that once we've pushed our body to its limit and we become fully aware of everything that our body is actually capable of, whether we're creating that mind muscle connection or we're just saying mentally, nope, we got one more rep in us, right? We've become really in tuned with our body, which ties in perfectly with this article number 4 on why you should lift. It improves body awareness.
That was a wonderful segue.
Yep.
Yeah. We've stressed this a lot. And you recall when you worked for me, when we had
Athletic Republic.
Yeah, right. Plug for Athletic Republic there with the sports performance facility. We were trying to promote programs for the elderly because many of those same plyometric type activities were very good for body awareness, whether you're an athlete or whether you're an aging adult. And strength training is no less of that. That when we're lifting weights, our bodies function in general much better. When you are even just doing the basic movements that we stress in this podcast, the squat, the hip hinge, horizontal press, horizontal pull, vertical pull, vertical push, and the carries, those are all teaching our bodies to move through space more effectively.
Well, speaking of moving through space, they also at Athletic Republic, I know we really, really focused on the inverted funnel. So we were really being aware of our body and moving into space and what we were capable of. And just seeing not only the high school and college athletes that we were training, but the parents that had brought in their young children at a young age when their bodies were developing and it was a key critical point, just seeing their balance, stability, their agility just coming in because they became in tune and aware. I think, did we have any elderly people came out? I thought we had
I wouldn't
one.
call them elderly. We had a couple older individuals, but by older, they were probably more in my age group than certainly in your age group. So we did have a few older.
I do recall like one gentleman, and we saw a lot of improvement with him as well. And it's so
it definitely helps to improve those neuromotor components of physical fitness. We think of and we've really over the years in exercise science not emphasized enough neuromotor components of fitness for the aging population, because speed and power, they don't seem to be things that are necessary for the older adult. Certainly balance, coordination, reaction time, and we maybe not think of agility in older terms, but having the ability to change direction correctly and accurately, particularly in a response to unexpected stimuli. We train too often with athletes, and this is one of the big beefs I have with a lot of other sports performance type programs, is that agility is trained without that reactive component to it. That you put down a bunch of cones and you tell the athlete to run as quickly as possible through those cones. Well, they know precisely where they have to go, how they have to cut. When we test in athletics, there's a number of different tests that are done using cone drills and your speed on those tell coaches theoretically how good of an athlete you're going to be. But if you practice those, you get really good at those. But agility in reality is if there's a sudden either perturbation in your body position or there's a demand to change direction quickly. So you're walking through your house and your dog walks in front of you. You're not going to trip over the dog, right? The elderly, having to step on and off of curbs or changing direction or missing a crack on the sidewalk or elevating, tripping over something. All of those are things that require a quick response and an accurate response. So those are necessary for the elderly. And so, yeah, those four, balance, coordination, agility, and reaction time. Yeah, we can see training those in the elderly, but we don't think of what's the need for speed. Sound like Tom Cruise there. I feel the need for speed.
The need for speed.
But, speed or power. But if you've ever seen a unfit elderly individual walking and they're walking very slowly and they're carrying their posture in such a way that they're kind of shuffling along, or power is basically just work over time. How quickly can we do things? And that and speed are very closely related, but we need power as we age. We don't need the explosive power maybe that we need in athletics, but being able to get up the steps a little bit quicker, being able to just bring that leg up and step up on the next step and move quickly, that's all power. And that can be trained and that can be maintained in the elderly in part through resistance training. And so I think there's a huge, huge need for resistance training as we age, not only for body awareness, but for the neuromotor connections that we can make that are going to enable us to age well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like what the article, how their words are. And essentially, it's a person who regularly trains weights builds stronger neuromuscular connections, which gives you more control over their body in space. That will limit the risk of injuries and training in life. It also opens up the door to an active life full of new fulfilling experiences. And what those experiences are, they can be anything between going in a hike, just walking in a grocery store, like you say, avoiding a fall, or if you're if you're an elderly listener and you have a bunch of grandkids, maybe just going to the park and throwing the ball around for them. By exercising and weight training, and why you should lift, you can build memories on the side of mountains, balance on a surfboard, in the ocean, throw your ball across the yard. We already discussed that. And I want this as a t-shirt, you don't just train to be good at training. You train to be better at life. And if that doesn't give you more inspiration on why you should lift, I don't know what does.
Listen to another podcast.
Actually, no. I do know one thing that could give you motivation to lift, which ties in to number 5, which is it improves life. It improves your sex life and attractiveness. Now, I know that can be a little controversial, but think about it. We as humans, we like to look good. We like to feel good, and we're attractive to other people that look good or feel good and give us that positive reinforcement of looking good and feeling good. So why would we not want to lift according to that? Your opinion on this category?
I agree. And I kind of like the way they continue with that is here are some of the other fun facts lifters don't often consider. First bullet point, lifting through full ranges of motion can improve flexibility and mobility, making more positions possible. Bullet point number 2, working in higher rep ranges can improve your endurance, which means round 1 will be less exhausting and round 2 or 3 will be more attainable. Now, obviously, they're talking to a much younger population than for many of us that are aging. If round 1, if we can get through round 1, we're happy with that. So number 3 bullet point was hoisting iron can boost your confidence, which is the thing that holds many back from getting naked in the first place. And, if you've seen a naked old person, you know that, lifting a little bit more weight can be a little bit helpful and beneficial for all of us.
Yep, there's one in every public gym. There's always one old person just hanging out.
But if you've been working out, you have the confidence to be doing that. So kudos to them. And then the fourth bullet point that they provide is if you feel good about your body and all it can do, you're able to enjoy time with your partner instead of focusing in on your own insecurities. And again, same thing. Yeah, if it goes back up to not being a whiny bitch kind of thing, it's going to give you better social success and emotional success that is going to make our relationships much stronger. And, if we have stronger relationships, then we can expect that our sex life and our attractiveness is going to be greater. So that's their 5 benefits. Anything you would add to any unseen benefits that we might have, particularly as we look at lifting weights for aging well?
I mean, we kind of talked about it, but I just think lifting weights in general, if you start at if a younger version of you starts and you make that mindset, you make that change, like I'm not just lifting to lift, or I'm not just doing this for me today, I'm doing this for my future self. I mean, the article didn't list that in there. We kind of talked about it on our own, but I do think that is a really, really important thing on why an individual should lift. You're not just lifting in this moment at this time. I mean, physically, yes, you are, but metaphorically speaking, you are lifting for your future self to keep up with your kids, with your grandkids. When you hit a retirement age, you're going to be able to experience everything that you worked so hard for. You're going to have that ability. It's not just an in the moment, look good, feel good, improve your sex life, improve your hormones, get rid of depression. You're not just doing it for the person that you are today. You're doing it for the person that you're going to be. So show that individual respect. And that is why you should lift.
And with that, I think, okay, well, we have probably 1 or 2 listeners that might be in their 80s that are thinking, well, that train done gone.
That's true.
Right? And so what's the point in starting to lift weights now? I've never lifted weights in my life. How is starting now going to change any of that? And I would say any age is a time to start. You can start lifting in your 80s. I had a client in Pittsburgh years ago who came to me at his 84th birthday. He had read what was then a pretty fresh new study out of Tufts University that looked at resistance training in nursing home facilities. And they demonstrated that and this is moderate, regular resistance training could reduce the dependence of the elderly on assisted devices like canes and walkers and those types of things. And he walked with a cane and decided he wanted to gift himself a personal trainer so that he can do away with using his cane. And, first time I met him, he's come shuffling in, really slow gait, relying on his cane. And within really a few months, he was just kind of carrying that cane. But, he didn't get big and buff. He wasn't lifting to build big muscles. He was lifting to be more functional, and he became more functional. And it probably added years to his life. Now, it might not be decades when you're starting at that point, but, if you can live a few extra years of productive life, or even have more productive years in your life, it might not add to, the date of your expiration, but it may add better quality to those years. Then why would you not want that? And I think anybody can start at any time to start doing something to improve what years they have remaining. And obviously, the sooner we do that, the better. But don't think you've missed that train. Start today if you've never lifted before.
Yeah, no, I agree. Coming from my background and working in independent livings and assisted livings and, the whole 9 yards, you see the residents there, that the ones that were really, really active before they came, who continued to stay active. I mean, they had a youthfulness about them. And then those that were sedentary. And then when I was working there, I, was the activities director, and we primarily focused with my degree of the exercise science. Like, we focused primarily on that. Like, that was the main activities of getting people exercise. A lot of the residents there, they stopped using either their walkers as often, canes as often, and those who needed assistance, like sitting up or getting out of bed, they were able to sit up or get out of bed or on their own with either on their own or minimal assistance. So yeah, it's never too late to start. Just make that investment in yourself.
And I would put in a little plug for some of our earlier podcasts where we talked about that. In episode 27, I spoke with the residents at Dallas Retirement Village down in Dallas, Oregon. And we talked much about that. We also, and I'm trying to find the exact episode number here, in my interview with Carmine Arpea, and I'm not finding that particular episode. He mentioned, what we've now coined as Carmine's Law, that strength plus posture equals balance. And as we age, we need to be stronger in order to maintain our better body positioning. And so when we train for strength and we train for better posture, we're going to limit the risk of falls in individuals. And, one of the worst things that can happen to you when you get older is to have a fall and break a bone, because healing is going to take a lot longer. And so resistance training is going to counteract that, and it's going to help us to age well. And so, as I look back through some of the different topics we talked about recently, I think we've been stressing repeatedly, lift weights, lift weights, lift weights. How can we lift weights? So I encourage the lifter to go back to some of those other episodes, listen to some of those. But I would make strength a priority as part of the exercise for the aging adult. Above cardiorespiratory, above flexibility per se, and even above body composition. We tend to focus too much on losing body fat, and we forget that as we lose body fat, we tend to lose muscle mass in the process. You're much better off gaining or maintaining muscle mass, and maybe keeping the same amount of body fat, but getting stronger and getting healthier. You're going to be able to do more and be able to function much better. And if you want to do some cardio and maintain that cardiovascular health, you're going to be able to do more because you have more muscle mass in the process. But strength training should be a greater priority than we've probably emphasized, not we being you and I, but society-wise, we've not focused enough on strength training as benefits for the elderly. And so I would strongly encourage strength training to be a bigger component of our fitness plan for aging well.
Well, I think that summarizes it perfectly. When asked the question, why do you lift? It could be a number of things, right? It could be, I want to look good. I want to have more confidence in my life. I want to get rid of my depression. I want to swoon my husband or my wife, or, I want to create that fire. I want to have more independence. I want to invest in my future self. Whatever it is that you choose your why on why you should be lifting, always remember the number one reason of why you should lift is to age well.
Age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.